Well, another day, AP Euro guys. How my, well, I'm not going to say favorite kids. I love you all. You're all God's children. But I'm hoping you're doing all right. Hoping the other classes aren't killing you. I know for a fact mine should not be killing you because we're at the point where we're really able to just kind of go back and look at the things we might possibly need for the exam that is coming up. And we left off. Oh, and by the way, I'll send out if you want more of the philosophy stuff, let me know. I'll just send me an email. If you want more of those, I mean, that's up to you because we're not going to get to the end of the year through the 20th century, 21st century due to the constraints. But let me know if you're interested in moving forward with that stuff because I know some of you guys really like that stuff. Just give me a holler and I'll put more of them out. I got nothing but time. So we left off at our Ignatius, Cannonball Day, and the creation of the Jesuits. And you'll see a couple things that are starting to occur. You're starting to see the Catholic Church coming under fire, and I gave you a whole sequence chronology by which that occurs. We talked about the anti-Trinitarians, the Anabaptists, Conrad Grebel, and the Schleitheim Confession, and so what we're kind of looking at now is what is the Catholic Church's response after you have the Peace of Augsburg. So the Peace of Augsburg in 1555. This is going to be one of those moments where you just have all of these various regions kind of coming together and saying, okay, what are we going to tolerate? And what it comes down to is Lutheranism or Catholicism. Now, Calvin will be okay in Geneva. Let me adjust this light. I can't look at myself if I look 90. And by the way, every time I look at a freeze frame, I always look like this on the YouTube thing. Oh, it's just awful. But getting back to what I was talking about, Calvin will be all right in Geneva because Geneva, with its canton system, is a sort of its own entity. And as you guys know from looking at things as recent as World War II, Switzerland's a very difficult place to try and impose your political will on, or religious / political will in this case, because it is surrounded by mountains. It's beautiful. It's very difficult to go in there and say, this is how it's going to work. Now, they're going to have civil wars in the 1500s, but that's them working out their own political infrastructure and religious infrastructure. So the Peace of Augsburg is going to come around in 1555, and it's going to some extent, put an end to some of these issues by allowing for Lutheranism. And the way it's going to kind of work is whoever the leader of a given region is going to determine what the religion of that region is. Now, that's not going to mean that there's going to be a whole remarkable amount of tolerance going on. That's not going to happen. But what is going to happen is you are going to see things kind of this tension is going to be reduced a bit. And from 1545 to 1563, you're going to have the Catholic Church confront some of its issues. Remember that whole chronology of what's going on within the Catholic Church, or the sort of movements that are threatening the Church's power. And the Church is going to learn from some of this. The Church definitely learns from the Reformation. They get together, but at the Council of Trent, one of the misconceptions is that the Catholic Church acknowledges Lutheranism or any kind of Reformed religion as legitimate. That is not the case at all. But the Council of Trent, the Catholic Church does acknowledge that they have some work to do. And, when you look at some of the things that come out of the Council of Trent, things like, bishops not hanging out in Rome, bishops being in their communities, because there needs to be a presence in their communities. That's a big part of the Council of Trent. They universally at the council condemn Protestantism. It is not I guess you're no. It is not one of those. It is Protestantism is condemned, but we are going to take a look at our internal infrastructure and see where we can better serve the people. And that's, what comes out of it is a more active church in local areas. Let's take a look. Let's see what else we need to cover here. Reformation and changing role of women. There's not a whole lot of changing role. One of the questions used to always be on the exam from this particular period was, if they gave an essay on the Reformation and the changing role of women, you would want to talk about how Luther and Calvin were fairly progressive when it came to giving women rights. Calvin more so than others. But Luther, the question on old AP tests used to be, how did Luther view women or something to that effect? And it was just this whole idea of the partnership. And that's Calvin too. And here's a quote from Luther. Imagine what it would be like without women. The home, the cities, economic life, and government would virtually disappear. Men cannot do without women. Even if it were possible for men to beget and bear children, they still could not do without women. There's Luther. Calvin, this is his wife has died. I have been bereaved of the best companion of my life, of one who, had it been so ordered, would not only have been the willing share of my indigence, I'm a mess today, but even of my death. During her life, she was the faithful helper of my ministry. So that would be, if they were going to ask you something, you would want to reference that mentality. And the women were allowed to divorce and remarry in I think Calvinism, but I'm not. Let me see if I think possibly Lutheran and Calvin churches. I think it might just be Calvinism, but Calvin is does give equal rights to women in Geneva. And in the Catholic Church, the role of women is going to stay pretty much where it was. Let's keep going with this. I'm trying to. I don't think they're going to go into arranged marriages, family size, birth control, wet nursing, but wet nursing is where you kind of pay someone to feed your baby. Birth control at this particular juncture is called coitus interruptus. I think you can probably figure out what that means. Let's see. Oh, this brings us to some of the characters, that two very important characters of this period in the Reformation period. Cervantes, with his rejection of idealism and his writing of Don Quixote. And he is, the Don Quixote is this farmer who's way too obsessed with whatchamacallit, knightly tales, I guess is what they call it. And he goes off on this journey with his buddy Sancho. Oh wait, is this a horse Sancho? I forget. Who's his buddy? He has the buddy that's always trying to like help him out, and he's gonna rescue Dulcinea. I can't find the I think the buddy is Sancho Panza, or is that the horse? I forget this stuff. We had to read excerpts of it. I've never gone through the whole thing. I've read parts of it, but it's this remarkable piece of literature that comes out and demonstrates, and it's written in it is written in vernacular, so that the people can read it, and it's just a remarkable piece of Spanish literature. And of course we have Shakespeare, who is the dramatist of the age. You've all had quite a bit with Shakespeare. The one thing that I would say with Shakespeare is Shakespeare wrote histories. He has a whole section of his work that are considered the histories. And one of the things that you want to keep in mind is that when he's writing about maybe it's Henry V, or fourth, when he's writing about Richard III, there's going to be bias there. So just that he's always a great example of bias, because he's writing at the time of Elizabeth in the Golden Age. So he's going to be very pro-English. So his histories, although are beautiful, they're not really histories. That would be one of the things you would want to remember about Shakespeare. Let's keep going. Oh, here we are. We are at these French wars of religion, which last from about 1562 to 1598. Now, what would you really want to know about the French wars of religion? Well, you're going to want to know about the Huguenot. And Huguenots, remember, Calvin gets his start in France, and the Huguenots, or Huguenot, as it's, I think, correctly pronounced, the Huguenots, Texas, the Huguenot issue comes about because we have I think it's John II is marrying off his daughter to, is it Ferdinand's son or Charles's son? And he takes a lance to the eye, and it leaves Catherine de Medici in power, and remember that she is trying to preserve her child, Charles IX's throne. And he's a small child when this happens. And you have these two families. You have the Guise family, which is the Catholic League. So the Guise family of France represents this militarist Catholic movement within Paris. Paris is the center of the Catholic League. And then you have Protestant families, Coligny and who are there's Coligny and, come on, give me the names of let's see, let's look them up. Look up the primary names of the Protestants. But one of the things that you have to understand is the Huguenots in France are a minority, but they're a very powerful minority. They tend to be they're a very wealthy minority. And it's important to understand that the Protestants and the Catholics have been going back and forth for quite a while, going back to the Habsburg Valois Wars. There's this back and forth, but let me see. I guess the thing you would want to start with this would be that St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre in 1572, in which Catherine de' Medici gives the go-ahead to slaughter Protestants. And I think it's important to understand that Catherine Medici is in a really precarious position. Charles IX, it's Coligny, that's the name I kept forgetting. Coligny has quite a bit of influence on Charles IX, and there have been other issues in which the Catholics and the Huguenots have been going back and forth, and she is trying to keep the balance so that her son will inherit or maintain a throne, because she is terrified of the power of the Guises, and she thinks that Condé and Coligny could maintain that balance, Protestant Catholic, and keep her son safe and her lineage safe. But there's going to become there's a tipping point, and Coligny had used his influence to win the King of France over to a French invasion of the Netherlands to support the Dutch Protestants. And that would have put the French on a collision course with Spain. And the Guises are like, this is ridiculous. This is right after the Spanish have beaten the Turks at Lepanto in 1571. So there's kind of a fear of Spain, and the fact that Coligny is able to influence little Charles IX on this level sends shockwaves through the Catholic League. And this is going to become a real issue, and they are going to say, let us take care of this. And she's going to let them take care of it. And so you see a massacre of Huguenots, which is, the numbers are about, I think it's like 25 to 30,000 Huguenots, and it's ugly too. They drag them out of their homes and kill them. And so what happens is, you have a period of warfare, and this is, remember, the War of the Three Henrys, and there's Henry III, who has taken over in 1574 the French throne. And he will be up against Henry, Duke of Guise, and then Henry of Navarre. Now, both Henry III and Henry, Duke of Guise, will be assassinated, and it leaves Henry of Navarre, a Protestant, in a perfect position to take the throne. And this is the famous Paris is worth a mass, where he has this conversion and takes the throne as Henry IV. So the culmination of this whole Catholics versus Huguenots in France results in a Protestant taking the throne, but he converts to Catholicism. And that's like the ultimate middle road, I guess you could say. But it does provide a resolution, because Henry IV will create the Edict of Nantes. Right? And let me get a date for the Edict of Nantes for you, 1598. And in the Edict of Nantes, Henry IV proclaims free worship for the Huguenots in France. Now later, Louis XIV will revoke the Edict of Nantes and start a mass exodus of Protestants from France, which is really dumb because the Protestants are pretty freaking wealthy. Let me see what else we got here. We have the Spanish cracking down on the Dutch. Cardinal Grenville sending in his various henchmen, and they will be largely defeated by William of Orange, but the main characters are, Grenville. He wants to create a strong Catholic Netherlands, and so he puts the Duke of Alba in charge, and he just sets up like death camps. So there's Holland, and by the way, remember that this whole time, one of the cooler parts of this is you have like Elizabeth in England, Elizabeth I, who has taken over for her Catholic sister Mary. Remember, so Henry VIII will die. His daughter with Catherine of Aragon is Mary I, and Mary is a hardcore Catholic. Her mother was Catholic. She has tremendous resentment towards the divorce, but she is known as Bloody Mary because she cracks down on Protestantism in England. She will die, and Elizabeth I will take over. And Elizabeth is one of those politiques who is a Protestant, she an Anglican, and she is not overly harsh towards the Catholics, but there is a massive exodus of Catholics. And of course, the Jesuits will try and kill her in the name of the Pope. She will evade death a few times. But really important is an alliance with Spain, and she's refusing to marry Philip, and Philip was married to her half-sister, Mary, Philip II of Spain, but she refuses to marry. She's the Virgin Queen. Virginia in America is named after her because the charter was given in her name. So anyway, but this whole Netherlands thing, she actually plays a role by financing the Protestant movement in Holland. And she also pays off like the quote unquote, remember the sea beggars, that crew of pirates that just pillage, and then she herself is she's pillaging Spanish ships and directing the money to the Protestant Holland to fight the Spanish. So she's fighting the Spanish with their own money, scandalous, but it is a really cool part of history. Sorry, I'm getting bogged down. What are we at? About 25 minutes. I'm trying to time these so that you can go on a walk and just kind of hear a little history. And so that's the whole point. But I don't want to drag them on too much. I talked a bit about Mary, who does crack down considerably on the Protestants. Elizabeth I, she won't marry. There is consistent deterioration in the relations with Spain. One of the guys that's kind of Oh, now you also have Mary Queen of Scots coming into the picture, who will be executed because Elizabeth's sort of one of her right-hand men, Walsingham, is able to pin a plot on Mary Queen of Scots, because Mary Queen of Scots sort of had a claim to the throne. She was the daughter of James. She has a claim to the throne. And so, I think probably the best thing for me to do would be to kind of do an Elizabeth review next time, because we're at about 26 minutes, and I want to make sure that these are things that you can just walk the dog with. Now, you are going to, for your final exam, you are going to take the last two, your assignments from this point forward are going to be the last two practice tests in your review book. So just an FYI, I'll post that, and you can take a look at it and see, start it whenever you want. And just, we're really just getting ready right now. So email me if you're interested in more like philosophy, like of existentialism stuff. Let me know. I'm happy to film those videos. Take care.